evening. Welcome to Virtual Noir at the Bar 21. Yes, 21. 21 weeks we've been doing this. The opening music tonight is from Josh Ritter. I loved it. I think Simon's taken it upon himself to try and educate me in music, but that's another story. Tonight, we have Harriet Tice, Luke Coons, Rhiannon Ward, Lynn Anderson, Jack Jordan, Ian Skewis, Araminta Hall, Kate Reid-Petty, Stuart McLean, and our mystery guest, Polly Fillier. Woo! Quick note, the woos are serious. If you haven't been here before, I'm not taking the mick. So if you hear something you're impressed by, give us a woo! When I pull the names from the new and improved hat, give us a drum roll. I might not be able to hear it, but I'll know what's happening anyway. Thank you to everyone who's donated via that link to keep this show on the road. There is only one more. Try not to cry. Try not to cry. If you would like to enter the draw this week to win a free book, please email that email address, vnatb20@gmail.com. The subject line, Happy 21st. And if you hear anything that you want to nominate for Quote of the Week, drop it in the chat and just let me know that you're wanting to give it a roll for Quote of the Week. So, without further ado, this is really sad. Let's raise a glass to our Virtual Noir tonight, number 21. Thank you for being here. So, let's get the first speaker on. Are you drum rolling? Are you though? I'll know if you're not. It is Stuart McLean. Lovely Stuart McLean was shortlisted for the first CWA Marjorie Allingham short story competition, and in 2018 he was selected by Bloody Scotland to be one of their Crime in the Spotlight authors. Ooh. Under the name C.S. McLean, he has written 2 hard-boiled private eye novels set in a world where the undead have risen, a genre he likes to call zombie noir. Available on Amazon, the first book is called They Shift Corpses, Don't They? His latest book is called The Ghoul with the Dragon Tattoo. So everybody, huge round of applause for our first reader this evening, Stuart McLean.
Hello, hope you can all hear me. Unmute myself. So yes, my 2 books are They Shoot Corpses, Don't They? And The Ghoul with the Dragon Tattoo, both zombie noir. But I'm going to read a short story today. Satanism isn't really everything it's cracked up to be, thought Bernard, letting out a heavy yawn. He dropped to one knee and began polishing the sacred altar to Beelzebub, using a soft cloth and a tin of Brasso. It's all these bloody rituals. Everything's got to be so precise. You light 13 candles on the stroke of midnight on the 13th day of the month while reciting the 17th passage from the Satanic Bible. You get one thing wrong, you get one single number out of place, and you might as well not have bothered. It's worse than being a ruddy accountant. I mean, my age, I should be out chasing girls, not polishing some weird horn and goat thing. Is there a problem? He looked up. The high priestess stood before him, tapping her foot against the wooden floor. Bernard's heart caught in his throat. He realised he'd been talking out loud. The high priestess was a fearsome woman, but not in an Aleister Crowley, demonic servant of the Dark Lord kind of way. She was more like a bad-tempered music teacher. She towered over him in her tweed waistcoat and fawn skirt, her hair scraped back in a bun so tight it pulled her face into a permanent look of surprise. I said, is there a problem? He stood up, hung his head low, unable to meet her gaze. I'm sorry, High Priestess, it's just, I've been having doubts about my calling. Doubts? She screeched. Yeah, it's just all this Satanism lark. It's not quite how I expected it. She wagged a finger in his face. Well, what do you think it was going to be? All cavorting naked in the moonlight, sacrificing virgins and attending blood-strewn orgies of sex and depravity? Well, frankly, yeah, I kind of hoped it was the case. Oh, do grow up. We haven't done that sort of thing for ages. Last time we cavorted naked in the moonlight, old Mrs. McCavity caught a nasty chill and we had to take her to A&E. But if it isn't about sex and cavorting naked, what's the point? I might as well join the Methodists. The High Priestess gave him a swift clip around the ear. Don't you blaspheme in here. I'm sorry. I mean, do you really want to go around sacrificing virgins? Well, once in a while would be nice. Oh, good grief. This is Essex, dear. Where am I going to find a virgin? He sighed. She was right, of course. When Jessie Brock first moved into the village of Sandwell 2 years ago, There was nothing to suggest that she was anything other than a harmless spinster. Formidable and slightly dotty perhaps, but nothing too strange. Even when several of the neighbourhood cats went inexplicably missing, nobody suspected a thing. It wasn't until Bernard was walking his Jack Russell around the church grounds that he found who she really was. Toby, the Jack Russell, had just been about to relieve itself when Bernard noticed the solitary headstone located on the very edge of the graveyard, as if the cemetery's other occupants had been too scared or embarrassed to keep company with this particular corpse. The inscription read, Jessie Brock. The remaining words were invisible behind a clutch of weeds. He knelt down, pulled back the plants. It now said, Jessie Brock died, 1693, burned as a witch. Bernard was so shocked he fell on his backside, sat staring at the gravestone until there was a cough at his shoulder. He turned to find Miss Brock looming over him. An ancestor of mine, she said. A very misunderstood woman. I have returned here to continue her work. What work? I intend to reconvene the Essex branch of the unholy church of His Imperial Majesty Satan. Bernard kept quiet. He didn't really have an answer to that. She held out a hand. And you, young man, would you care to join me? You want me to become a witch? I'm a Satanist, dear, not a witch. Do try and keep up. Okay. Mickey Dalton sipped at his pint. What I hear, she's got gold candlesticks in there, all diamond studded and shit, worth a fortune. Kevin, his brother and partner in crime, nodded eagerly. They were both clad in leather jackets and Doc Martens with identical shaved heads. Either of them were dim enough to be classed as a village idiot, although Kevin possibly had the edge. Mickey continued, and I've heard she's a witch or something, doing all these evil rituals. So what I'm thinking is, if someone was to go in there, liberate all that gold stuff, it wouldn't be like theft. It'd be like doing God's work. Do you get me? No, said Kevin. Mickey sighed. I'm saying we break in there and nick her stuff. Oh, right. Why don't you say so? I mean, it's got to be better than stacking shelves at Tesco's, hasn't it? So, you in? Stupid question, really. Burglary? Theft? The possibility of violence? Of course he was in. Bernard was on his hands and knees, wiping the floor with a damp sponge. There was a pentagram painted on the linoleum, and Bernard had been ordered to give it an extra special clean as punishment for his doubts. Ruddy Satanism, which had never joined. He heard breaking glass, looked up, startled. Hello? Who's there? Two men entered the room, clad in leather, with stockings over their faces. You, do as you say and you won't get hurt. Give us the gold. Mickey? Kevin, is that you? Oh, bollocks. Kevin tore off his mask. How do you know it was us? You still get your name tag on from Tesco's. Oh, Mickey pulled off his own mask. Doesn't change anything, does it? We still want the gold. Kevin produced a knife. Changes something, all right? We can't risk leaving a witness behind, not seeing as how he knows who we are. What? Bernard's voice shrank to a whisper. Take the ruddy stuff. I don't care. I won't tell anyone. The two men approached menacingly. Bernard backed away. I mean it. I won't tell. Kevin lunged. The knife slashed at Bernard's arm. Bernard squealed. Kevin swung the blade once more. And then Kevin's foot stepped onto the damp sponge. His leg shot upwards and he lost his balance. Careering backwards and falling onto the altar, he landed on the statue of Beelzebub, one golden horn piercing the back of his neck and emerging through his Adam's apple. He twitched several times, then became very, very still. Mickey looked at his brother, screamed, and ran from the building. Bernard stood in shock for several minutes, unable to move. He was still staring at Kevin's body when a familiar voice said, "So what happened here?" Bernard pointed at the corpse. "There's been a horrible accident," she sneered. "Accident, my bottom. You do realise he looks after his own?" "Who does?" "Who do you think?" "Oh, I see." Bernard looked at the blood-soaked statue. It seemed to be winking at him. "Tell me," Jessie Brock said sternly. "Do you still want to leave my flock?" Bernard swallowed. "No, I don't think so. I think I'll stick with the devil I know." Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that, Stu. What a way to start. That was brilliant. Thank you. And I think that was my favourite satanic reading that we've had at Virtual Noir at the Bar. So thank you. Okay, just a quick couple of mentions as well, folks. There's a Q&A down on the taskbar somewhere. If you want to drop your questions in for any of our panellists tonight, I will endeavour to ask them. And also, I think most of you know there's a chat facility. So if you would like to have a chat, please do, but not while any of the readers are speaking. That would be super. Thank you. So who's going to follow Stuart? It is Lynn Anderson. We've got a very strong Scottish theme tonight, I think. Lynn Anderson is an award-winning Scottish author and screenwriter. Ooh, book 15 in her forensic scientist Dr. Rona McLeod thriller series, The Innocent Dead, was published on the 6th of August 2020. Ooh. Time for the Dead, book 14 in the series, is currently longlisted for the McIlvanney Prize for Scottish Crime Book of the Year 2020. Ooh. Lynn is also a board member and co-founder of the annual Bloody Scotland International Crime Writing Festival. So we are in very esteemed company tonight. Everybody, please give a huge round of applause to Lynn Anderson.
Hi, I'm going to read out a little bit from The Innocent Dead now. The April sun was bright, but not strong enough to have made any difference to the temperature of the Lochan. In an attempt at bravado, Dougal had waded in already, wearing nothing but his trunks. Julie knew he didn't like swimming anywhere other than a proper swimming pool, where he could see what lurked beneath him. A calm sea was also manageable, provided he wasn't required to venture out too far, and he could see the sandy floor. A dark brown loch, on the other hand, was Dougal's idea of a horror movie in which he had a starring part. So to get him to come here, Juliet had to agree to an evening, doing exactly what Dougal wanted. Julie had no problem with that, since Dougal's romantic plans for tonight pretty well matched her own. Without a wetsuit, he won't last long enough to enjoy the water, Julie thought as she watched him wade in cautiously. Once the tingling in his upper body moved from mild to severe pain, Dougal would be back on shore quicker than he went in. Ready now, Julie walked in slowly, enjoying the sensation of the water entering her wetsuit to form a warm, protective film against her skin. Launching herself forward, she began to swim, feeling the soft, peaty water enclose her light brown silk. Much as she loved swimming in the sea in all seasons, there was nothing to beat a freshwater loch, whatever the time of year. Turning, she floated on her back and closed her eyes, enjoying the gentle slurp of water in her ears. It was Dougal's sudden shout that disturbed this dreamlike state. Julie turned over and took a look, assuming the cold had got to him by now. It certainly appeared that way. He was swimming, seemingly in a great hurry, back to the strip of sand where they'd undressed earlier. "Froze your balls off, did you?" Julie shouted. "I warned you." Having reached the shore, he rose, swore loudly, and pointed at the opposite bank. "What?" Julie said, unmoved by his antics. Dougal was a joker, and he'd caught her out on numerous occasions, so her first instinct was to ignore him. "Fucking look," he stuttered, his face white, his body starting to shiver. He was putting on a fine performance. Julie had to admit that. Next, no doubt, would come the theme tune from Jaws. He tried that one during one of her wild sea swims. "Get dressed before you freeze to death," she shouted back. "There's hot coffee in my rucksack." "Julie, I'm not kidding. There's something over there in the fucking bank." Due to the long, dry spring weather, the water level in the loch was the lowest she'd ever encountered, leaving the raised peat bank on the far shore exposed. Although still suspicious, Julie turned and made for the spot where Dougal continued to point. At first glance, the bank looked normal, although some of it had crumbled away, exposing the twisted form of heather roots. "There!" Dougal shouted, panic still in his voice. "There's something there!" Julie got closer, treading water, and reached up for the odd bulge made by the knotted roots. Her touch sent more dry peat to detach and plop into the water alongside her. The tingling cold surged into her own upper body, making her gasp. Yet it wasn't the length of time she'd been in the water that caused her sudden drop in temperature, but horror at what she now saw. Free of earth, the leathery finger poked through the tangle of roots to beckon her, as though in desperation.
Thank you so much for that, Lynn. We do have a question from Alex Hawley, who would like to know, why did you choose a forensic protagonist over all the other genre options?
My father was a policeman, a detective in Greenock, and he worried a lot about his 3 daughters. So I had an idea that I might have an opening scene where someone would turn up at a scene of crime and they thought that the victim was connected to them, which was my father's constant fear. And I didn't know the capacity in which they would be. Would it be a policeman? Would it be a... Why were they at the scene of crime? And I taught a girl called Emma Hart mathematics at Granton in the Spey in the Highlands, and she went off to become a forensic scientist. In the very early days, I didn't know what that was really. I thought it didn't sound like a proper subject to me, what was wrong with maths. But however, she came home and talked about it, and she obviously loved it. So it was a serendipity move. I thought it will be a woman like Emma, and she'll be a forensic scientist. And I knew nothing about forensic science. I knew someone who did, so I could ask them, but I fell in love with the subject and ended up going back and doing a diploma course at my old university in forensic medical science. And it was just luck, as happens quite often, I think, in writing. You suddenly, a character walks into your head and decides what they're going to be. So that was how it happened.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that. Ella Berry has also dropped in the comments, as a wild swimmer, this is my own worst nightmare. I was literally wild swimming this morning and now this. Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant.
Well, I'm a wild swimmer too, so she has my sympathy.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so our final reader of the first act is going to be, can I have a drum roll please? Luke Coons, who actually helped edit Noir from the Bar, our charity anthology. Just had to get it in there. Well, I haven't mentioned it for a few weeks, so you know, if you've read it, review it. If you haven't read it, buy it. Whatever. Luke Coons writes historical crime fiction. He has an MA in creative writing from Kingston University, where he is currently working on a PhD on hard-boiled detective fiction. Now that sounds like my kind of PhD. He is originally from Indiana, which is basically a giant cornfield. His words, not mine. But Luke now lives in London. So everybody please give a huge round of applause to Luke Coons.
Hello. Right. So I'm just going to give a tiny bit of background real quick. So I'm reading from, as Vic said, my PhD book. It's a 1920s hard-boiled suspense novel. It follows an American PI who lives in London but has to go to Edinburgh for a case that involves his estranged father. But when he's up there, he kind of gets embroiled in another investigation. That's kind of where this chapter that I'm going to read is set. So this guy named Edwin has had his manuscript stolen, and there's a ransom for his return. So Logan is lying in wait up on top of Calton Hill in the middle of the night to kind of watch this exchange take place with the ransom and then follow the person who takes the ransom money. But Logan is a little bit unhappy about the situation because the person delivering the ransom money is the lady who he's starting to have feelings for. So I will have a go. I've held this spot for near an hour. Harry should be on her way by now. Her words of rejection come to the front of my mind. It's complicated, she said. Did I misread her on the train? Did I make up the sparks between us? Hell, I don't know. I don't think so. But now that I've become the help, she backs away. Wait, someone's here. An orange glow from a cigarette flashes against the blackness. I take the Colt from the holster and hover my thumb over the safety. The figure approaches. It's a man in a bowler hat. His feet crunch on the snowy pebbles. A woody aroma comes off the cigarette and an orange glow reflects off his glasses. He scans the area, first the observatory house and then the Dugald Monument. He walks up to the observatory house and looks around. The cigarette glow gives his position away. He comes back down and carries on northeast around the bend of the hill. He's gone. I loosen the hold on the Colt. Get a grip, Logan, you're on a job. There's no room to be distracted right now like some lovesick asshole. You're just angry that you don't have so much as a goldfish to garner affection from. Now focus. 15 minutes since the smoking man vanished, footsteps come from around the direction that the smoking man went. But it's Harry. It's time. She's in a dark long coat, but the bright red band on her cloche hat stands out in the dark. A briefcase is in her left hand, Edwin's ransom. She walks with confidence into danger. Hang on. What is she doing? Harry has paused a few yards in front of the monument. She's hesitating. You don't have to do it, Harry. Turn around, go home if you want. But her feet take her around the back side of the monument. Here we go. There are footsteps from the southeast. A dark figure comes around from the direction of the Nelson Monument. I track the figure with the Colt. There's a bag in his hand. It looks like a doctor's bag. I think this is the smoking man, similar coat and hat, but he didn't have that bag at first. There might be another man around. If I blow his knee out now, I can take Edwin's manuscript from him, and Harry doesn't have to give him the money. I switch the safety off. No, there might be another man, don't be reckless. He goes behind the monument. The wind howls, trees rustle, sway, and creak. The minutes move like hours. 1 minute. Come on, come on, come on. Get out of here, Harry. 2 minutes. I could just rush in and get the guy, usurp Edwin's plan, but Harry might get hurt. 3 minutes. How long is this going to take? 4 minutes. He could be strangling her, poison her. I'm a fucking terrible guardian angel. 5 minutes. I start to inch out of the thicket. Stop. The figure walks out from behind the monument, and the briefcase is in one hand, and the doctor's bag is in another. He goes around the bend and descends the path towards the road. Harry hasn't come out, nor made a sound. Blood rushes in my ears. I scramble down the hill and race towards the monument. If he's killed her, I'll kill him. I'll kill Edwin for doing this. I come around the back side of the monument. Harry, I whisper. She sat against the iron bars of the fence. Her knees are pushed up against her chest. Her head hangs. I bend down and take her in my arms. My God, Harry, are you hurt? She jolts and looks at me. She's alive. Logan, she embraces me. Her body shakes with adrenaline. He handcuffed me to the bars while he checked for the money. I thought he was going to kill me. Did he hurt you? I help her to her feet. There's an envelope in her hand. No, I'm okay. And we got the manuscript back. She sounds like she's about to cry. Good. You need to get out of here. Get back to Edwin's. I'm going after that guy. You did well. I kiss her cheek and without a thought. I don't hear Harry's reply as I start after the man. I think she said be careful. The man is near the bottom. I keep close to the edges of the path as I follow. I move quick. I slip over a patch of ice and brace myself against the wall. The man stops and turns his head back up to see what's going on. I press my body close as I can to the wall, but he feels my presence. Shit. The man speeds down the steps to the bottom of the path. I aim my Colt, but he ducks around the corner. I come out onto Waterloo Place. Where the hell is he? A near-empty tram squeaks its way out of the city, and a roaring auto zooms towards Newtown. There he is across the road. He moves towards Newtown. From the other side of the street, I tail him. I keep him in the umbrella of my vision. He looks across the road and double takes at me. Don't frighten him. Don't make him think you're watching him. His gaze follows me. A rattling truck passes and blocks him from my view. I stop dead in my tracks. He's gone. Fuck, where'd he go? I dart into the middle of the road. He's not holding on to the back of the truck, and it moved too fast for him to have jumped into. The dark archway of Old Calton Burial Ground catches my attention. The iron gate is propped open. He's gone in there. My Colt in hand, I cross the road, and I enter into the darkness. Back to you, Vic.
We're actually going to stay with you for a minute there, Luke, because Louise Fairbairn would like to know, what made you set your story in Edinburgh?
Well, okay, so long story short, I helped a friend of mine. She had a book event going on in Edinburgh at the Fringe Festival back in, I think, 2017. And so I was in the city for about maybe 3 weeks or so, and I really fell in love with it. I loved the city. I loved its gothicness. And I really wanted to write a story set in Edinburgh and give me excuses to go visit Edinburgh. And so that's why.
Brilliant, thank you. So Luke was continuing the Scottish vibe there. So big thanks to Luke. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we are going to head over to our first break of the evening, and we will be back in 5 minutes.
Someday, when I'm awfully low, when the world is cold, I will feel the glow just thinking of you and the way you look tonight. You're lovely with your smile so warm and your cheeks so soft. There is nothing for me but to love you and the way you look tonight. With each word your tenderness grows, tearing my fears apart. And that laugh that wrinkles your nose, it touches my foolish heart. Lovely, never ever change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it? 'Cause I love you and the way you look tonight. With each word, your tenderness grows, tearing my fears apart. And that laugh that wrinkles your nose, it touches my foolish heart. Lovely, never ever change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it? 'Cause I love
Jason Isaacs. He does it every week, doesn't he? You just want to sway along with him. Okay. Folks, it is our penultimate V-Nat-B for the weekly sessions, but we are hoping to return at some point, and there will be more information coming about that in the next little while. Okay, so give me a drum roll. It is Kate Reid Petty. I'm so excited about this. Kate Reid Petty lives in Baltimore, Maryland. Maryland, I don't know. Her fiction and essays have been published online by American Short Fiction, LA Review of Books blog, and many others. In addition to fiction, Kate's short films have appeared on Narrative magazine and at the Maryland Film Festival. Woo! She is also co-author of the children's graphic novel Casmonites with Boyer Sun. Kate graduated from the College of William and Mary and earned a Master of Letters in Creative Writing from the University of St Andrews, Scotland. Kate's novel, True Story, I believe is out now, but Kate will be able to tell us better. And you've probably seen it all over social media this year because it actually has 4 different covers. Woo! So, and it's a fantastic book. So if you haven't got it already, I'm telling you to get it now. I'm really, really thrilled to have Kate joining us from the US today. So everybody, huge round of applause for Kate Reid Petty.
Thank you so much, Vic. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, the book is out now. It's called True Story. This is the final hardcover version that you can get, although I think you can get covers specific to the 4 different ones through Goldsboro Books. The book follows, it switches different perspectives and different characters' voices as it goes. So I'm going to read kind of from the middle, but I don't think that you need much background to really follow what's going along. So thank you. Excited to be here. Nick was parked at one of those backwoods gas stations that haven't even installed credit card readers on the pumps. It was Thursday, 2 hours into the drive, and he was already bored. So when the check engine light had clicked on, he'd stopped at this gas station to check the oil in his mom's car, pretending he knew how, saying to himself in his head, "See, Lindsay, I'm responsible." But then apparently he didn't properly latch the bar that holds the hood open, and it lost its grip and slammed down on the fingers of his left hand. He anticipated the pain before he felt it, a sharp tingling and then a numb ache, and he knew it was going to be bad, and then, Jesus, he felt it, suddenly bad and getting worse. He jumped up and down a little bit, trying to push through the pain to its peak and out the other side, trying to tackle it head on, because the whole point of this weekend was to build up the discipline to look at pain straight in its ugly face. Still, his fingers hurt, but it was too early in the drive to start drinking. He'd never make it all the way to Lindsay's cousin's cabin if he started drinking now. So instead, he grabbed his backpack out of the back seat and pulled out the $70 bottle of bourbon he'd bought special for this trip and just held it against his left hand to see if the proximity made the pain better. And when it didn't, he opened the bottle and sniffed, which didn't really help either, except in the way that pregnant women learn to breathe. He thought about taking a little sip, just to get his brain to slow down a bit and stop chattering like this, on and on and on, but it really was too early to start drinking, and there were people around. So he tucked the bottle back into his backpack, congratulating himself on his discipline, and went inside the gas station and bought a packet of cigarettes and a lighter and a package of cookies and a big waxed paper cup of Mountain Dew as reward for not drinking. He stood just outside the door with the sun in his face, set the soda and the cookies on the lid of the big red trash can, and unwrapped the plastic from the cigarette pack. Using his right hand to flick the lighter, holding the cigarette between his left thumb and pinky, because all his other fingers were still hurting, he lit up and inhaled. A beefy man with leathery skin walked past and gave Nick a look, like Nick was wearing a clown suit or something, even though he was just wearing jeans and an old Metallica t-shirt. Maybe the man was frowning because of the way Nick was holding the cigarette, or maybe it was because of the way his hair was cut, or maybe it was some essential thing about Nick, the air of a comfortable white suburban middle-class upbringing that Nick would never be able to hide. Nick tried not to let it bother him. What did he care what that redneck thought? All he cared about was how good this cigarette felt and how great this trip was going to be, how great this trip already was. He pretended that his bender had already started, that the journey was the reward, that the drinking he was getting ready to do was just an excuse to be alone in the woods, instead of the other way around. And he switched the cigarette to his right hand and held it with his first 2 fingers, like all good Americans, looking at the road ahead of him and at the sparse woods beyond the gas station, where old cans and piles of trash were scattered all around. When his cigarette was almost gone, he pulled out another and lit it with the first, and it was delicious as he inhaled. But then he realized that if he didn't stop himself now, he was going to smoke this whole pack of cigarettes in the next half hour. And he was seized by an impulse to be good, to be better, to be strict with himself, and also to be wild. He started throwing cigarettes away. 3 or 4 at a time, enjoying the recklessness of it, the discipline and masochism, plus the sheer wastefulness. He really was such an asshole, wasn't he? Yeah, you're right about that, Lindsay. And this was truly going to be a weekend of nonsense and chaos, a personal pan pizza-sized performance art piece. Hey, asshole. Nick froze, the nearly empty packet of cigarettes in his left hand and 4 cigarettes in his right, holding the lid of the trash can open and the lit cigarette balanced on his lip, the ash lengthening delicately off the burning end. And Nick looked over his shoulder and saw the beefy man again, walking out of the store, leading with his belly, which was pronounced and firm. And he walked up, his belly uncomfortably close to Nick, and said, "That's not how you smoke a pack of cigarettes." Nick pulled the 4 cigarettes away from the can and held them in front of his chest in a closed fist, and wondered if this was the start of a fight. He had never been in a fight with a stranger, especially not such a large and leathery stranger, and he felt terrified and wondered if he could give this man one of his pints of cheap whiskey as a peace offering, which would be totally fine. He could stop by another liquor store. And so he smiled at the man with all of his teeth, telegraphing how little of a threat he was, and tucked the 4 cigarettes back in the pack. "I'm trying to quit," he said, "so I can't keep these all. I'm throwing most of them away, but I'm going to keep just one, and I'm going on a trip in the woods. This way, I can only have one more." The man squinted at him and asked, "What woods are you going to?" And Nick wondered, was there something in the guy's mouth? Was the guy chewing something? "Just outside the state park, over yonder in Young's County," Nick said, embarrassed that he had said yonder, worried the man had noticed the affectation, and also worried that he was wrong about his landmarks, because he had only been to this cabin once, with Lindsay, more than a year ago, and he didn't know which state park it was close to. He just knew the state park was a thing they had talked about visiting. "Well, you should be careful," the man said, his eyebrows up, real serious. "There's killers in the woods." Then his face changed as he laughed to let Nick in on the joke, a deep laugh that stretched his mouth open wide, and Nick smiled again with all of his non-threatening teeth and kind of went, "Aha," in a way he hoped was non-committal. The man was shaking his head to himself, laughing at his own joke, as he pulled a cigarette pack out of his shirt pocket and opened it to show Nick the single cigarette left inside. Then he closed it and held it out, an offering. "Here, I'll trade your sins away," the man said. Nick struggled to understand the deal for an embarrassing second, but pulled himself together and took the man's pack with the single cigarette and traded it for his own pack, which was now half empty, or half full, depending on the man's outlook on life. The man said, "I usually don't smoke Camels, but a little experimentation never hurt anyone." And then, honest to God, the man winked and kind of raised an eyebrow, and Nick smiled and made a gesture like he was tipping an imaginary hat, and then turned and walked quickly back to his mom's car, trying to commit the line to memory, knowing he would tell this story over beers for years to come. Maybe not to Lindsay, but maybe, yes, to Lindsay. Maybe she would laugh if she heard. "Oh, Nick," she might say, shaking her head but smiling at his story about the time some redneck propositioned Nick at a gas station in the backwoods that he only in that moment realized was actually one of those gay cruising spots that for the most part had been rendered obsolete by the internet. Nick felt the man's eyes on his back but just kept walking, walked purposefully to his car, keeping his back straight, trying not to look like he was rushing. When he had opened his cookies and his Mountain Dew and pulled back onto the narrow highway, it was just after noon. So if he drove 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, he'd get to the cabin with a couple of hours of daylight left to build a warm fire and a good buzz. But almost immediately he realized the flaw in his plan, which was that he was going to have to drive for 3 more hours, and it was already boring, and he'd already eaten all of the cookies. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We do have a question for you from Alex Hawley. Do you have any British influences, and if so, whom?
I'm drawing a complete blank. I feel like I'm completely fried. I do have many British influences. The only book that I'm thinking of right now though is Caitlin Moran, who's so different than this piece that I just read. So let me think of that and I'll get back to you in the chat. But thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for being here. Okay, right, okay. Bonnie, you asked in the chat what you were going to watch when VNAT B finishes next week. All I'll say is wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Watch the next break, okay? I feel really awkward now. Anyway, okay, on to the next one, as Jay-Z said. Several have just dropped on the floor. I'll pick those up in a minute. Happens every week. Very exciting. Araminta Hall is next. Allow me to tell you about her. Araminta Hall worked as a journalist for many years before publishing her first novel in 2011, the Richard and Judy pick Everything and Nothing. Woo! Since then, she has published Dot and Our Kind of Cruelty. Her new novel, Imperfect Women, is out tomorrow and has recently been optioned by Elizabeth Moss's new production company. Woo! Araminta lives in Brighton with her husband and 3 children, and I'm sure you, like me, are really delighted to have her here tonight. So everybody, huge round of applause on publication eve to Araminta Hall.
Hello. Hello. Thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here. And as Vic said, I am going to be reading from my novel, which is out tomorrow, Imperfect Women. And I am just going to read from really near the beginning, a couple of pages, and I don't think you really need to know anything. So here I go. As she drove the few miles between her small flat and Nancy's large house, Eleanor calibrated all the words she would say to her friend when she saw her next. How she would demand that Nancy stop playing these stupid games with them all and just own up to what she had done so they could get on with their lives. It sometimes felt like Nancy had written herself out of the story of her own life, and surely that was an act of sabotage. She stopped at a red traffic light and 3 teenagers tripped across the road, their arms interlinked, their faces creased by laughter. And then she just felt sad because they almost felt like a message from her past or a rip in the seam of time, because they could have been Eleanor, Nancy and Mary for more than 25 years before. One of the girls turned as they passed the car and her gaze locked with Eleanor's, her smile faltering for a moment before she was pulled back into the conversation by her friend. They looked like the students Nancy, Mary and she had been when they'd met on almost their first day of their first week, amazed at their luck in finding one another so soon. Eleanor wondered if they were going back to a messy house in which they'd laugh about the night they'd just had before talking about the people they were going to become, the loves they would experience, the lives waiting for them to step into. Nancy and Robert's house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Eleanor could tell from the road that he must have been into every room, and now the place shone out of the dark street as if ready for a party. Robert's face showed up in the rounded living room window, and he opened the front door as she came up the steps, where they hugged a greeting, him drawing her in as he always did. "Shall I make some tea?" he asked as they went down to the basement kitchen. "I'll do it, sit down," Eleanor said. He did as he was told, folding his already crumpled body into a chair and rubbing his hands in his eyes, creasing further his rumpled skin. His blonde hair was a mess, sleep-ravaged, she thought, and it spiked her familiar tenderness for him. They sat together and sipped their tea, neither of them saying anything. Neither of them wanted to be the one to say it, neither wanted to know or tell. For a second, Eleanor thought they could have just been a couple, an early start at work beckoning, their comfortable house settled around them. "Do you know where she is?" Robert asked finally. "Not exactly." Eleanor cupped her hands around the mug and tried to imagine how she was going to say what she knew. "But there is someone else, isn't there?" He looked straight at her with his question. Oh God, Robert, I could kill Nancy. She couldn't be the one to tell him, but then again, she couldn't lie to his face. "How long has it been going on? You need to have this conversation with her, but I can't, she's not here." Nancy had been putting her in impossible situations for most of their lives, Eleanor thought, but this was perhaps the worst. She might not forgive her this time. "Oh, Robert, I'm so sorry. Did she go to him last night?" "After we met, she said she was going to meet him. I didn't know beforehand, I promise." "It's not your fault, Eleanor," but his voice was harsher than she had heard before. "Do you think that's it then? Have they run away together?" "I really don't think so. She's been trying to end things with him for a while, but he hasn't been taking no for an answer." For the first time, Eleanor felt a seam of fear in her belly because Nancy had been wanting to end the affair for a while now, and she couldn't imagine what this other man could have said to make her change her mind like this. Nancy wasn't mean. She wasn't the sort of person not to come home to her husband of more than 20 years. Eleanor spoke again to allay her fears. "She's hardly told me anything about him, beyond the fact of him. She was upset last night. She really has been trying to finish things." "Who is he?" Eleanor felt nausea rise through her body with the warmth of the tea. "Really, I don't know. All she's told me is that he's called David and she met him through a work thing." He flinched at the information as if she had burnt him. "But is it serious enough for her to do this, for her to leave?" "I don't know," she said. "It's been going on for about a year." Robert rocked back with her words. "But really, she was in the process of ending it, or at least trying to. She wants to try to make you work with you." God, Nancy deserved less than this. So this could just be one last... His words trailed into the air, their sordidness sullying the perfection of the new kitchen Nancy had just put in. "Oh, Robert, this is fucking ghastly. You don't deserve this. I'm so sorry. Anyone would have done the same in your position. I mean, Nancy's your friend, but you're my friend too." She reached over and put her hand over his as she spoke, and his skin was surprisingly soft. The smile he gave her was stretched and tight. "If it makes it any better, I've told her how much I disapprove of it all since the beginning. I've never encouraged her." Robert checked the clock above the door and Eleanor followed his gaze. "I suppose I should be getting ready for work," he said. But it's only 5:30. We've got a big case on. But I mean, surely today, you really going in? I can't sit around here moping, and I'd rather not make any decisions before I've spoken to Nancy. It'd be better to keep busy. So you're going to forgive her? Eleanor's voice sounded shrill to her ears, without knowing any of the facts. The charm of Nancy's life reverberated around her, and for a moment she couldn't bear it, couldn't bear that Nancy would get away with this as well. But she pushed that thought away. She needed to stop letting the last years sour her feelings. Nancy was also a woman she loved and cherished, who made her laugh, who was always at the other end of a phone, who often took care of her. I didn't say that, Robert said. Eleanor heard the pureness of the anger in his voice. His hand was gripping the side of the table, the veins standing out on his skin. But we've been together for a very long time, and there's Zara. I mean, you don't just throw away more than 20 years. The moment felt unreal, maybe because it was so early and still as dark as night outside. Eleanor swallowed her tears along with her shame. Of course she didn't know what it was like to consider those sort of things, other people, long time loving. But then Robert stood, so Eleanor did the same. He clearly wanted her to leave. Thanks for coming, Robert said as they made their way back up the stairs. They stopped at the front door. How did you know she was having an affair? Robert shrugged, his eyes refusing to rest on hers. Something's obviously been up for a while. I suppose it's just one of the things you consider. Eleanor rubbed Robert's arm through his jersey. I think he'll sort it out. I hope you do. He opened the front door and the chill of the early morning was penetrating. If you hear from her today, he said, let me know. She might not call me. Of course I will, and you me. She was shivering with the cold, but Robert hadn't seemed to notice. Anyway, she turned to go, but as she did, a white car pulled up outside the house. She looked back at Robert and his face told her that she wasn't wrong. They both watched in the silent, thick stillness of the morning as two policemen got out of the car and turned towards the house. Oh God, Robert said behind her. As the two men came up the steps, their uniforms blended into the dark. Mr. Hennessy, one asked. Yes, Robert said. Can we come in, please, sir? Robert stepped back and Eleanor remembered that you had to invite vampires into your house. They couldn't just walk in. They went back into the hall. Eleanor wanted to shake them all, to ask the policeman why it wasn't strange to find them standing on the doorstep before dawn. She didn't want to be part of their world in which everything and anything was probable. Is there somewhere we can sit down, the policeman asked. So Robert opened the door to the drawing room, which was painted in the bright yellow Nancy had always loved. One room in every house should be sunny, Eleanor recalled her saying as she sat on the sofa, as if they were a group of friends who happened to be meeting before most people were awake. Sorry, and you are, the policeman said to Eleanor. Oh, sorry, this is Eleanor Meekins. She's a good friend of my wife's. The statement hung terrifyingly in the air when it should have needed explanation. Please, Mr. Hennessy, sit down, the policeman said. No, replied Robert, I'd rather stand. The policeman removed his hat and his colleague copied. I'm very sorry. The body of a woman in her late 40s was found just over an hour ago, and we have reason to believe it's your wife, Nancy Hennessy. At that, Robert sat down, right next to Eleanor. She felt the sofa compress and his body sink against hers. She concentrated on that for as long as she could while the rest of the world spun around her.
Thank you so much for that, Araminta, and best of luck tomorrow with publication day.
Thank you.
Okay, so, oh, and Araminta, your bookcase is getting a lot of love as well. Aaron Dimmick really appreciates it. Okay, are you ready? Have we got the drum rolls going? It is the lovely Ian Skewis. Ian Skewis is a freelance editor and proofreader for indie and debut authors and an associate editor for Bloodhound Books. His editorial debut for Bloodhound became a bestseller and has been longlisted for The Guardian's Not the Booker Prize. Woo! As an author, Ian's debut novel, A Murder of Crows, was also a bestseller and longlisted for the same award. He actually narrates his own audiobook and is spectacular, which you're going to find out any second now, but I just had to say that. Ian also writes horror, science fiction and literary fiction, and his latest titles can be found via his website, ianskewis.com. So everybody, please put your hands together for my lovely friend, Ian Skewis.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here tonight, and thank you for that big build-up. I'm scared I'm going to disappoint everybody now. So yes, I'm going to read from a short story this evening, and this is it's called A Man of Many Parts, And it's a story that covers many parts as well, in that it covers quite a number of different genres, but certainly the opening of the story covers what I would call domestic noir. So this is a mock-up of the front cover at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I publish short stories in paperback editions, and this is one that's just going to come out any day now. And I give them away free. So all you have to do is subscribe to my newsletter and send me an email with your postal address, and I can send you a copy of the latest short story out. And there's no postage charge either, it is completely free. So anyway, I won't do a preamble, I'll just get straight stuck into the short story, A Man of Many Parts. Lisa woke up in hospital. A nurse stood over her, explained that she was found lying by the side of the road, unconscious. Perplexed, she tried to remember what had happened. Then it came back to her. The argument between her and Brian. He had pulled over and thrown her out of the car, then got back in and sat there, seething behind the wheel. Then there came that look and the revving up of the engine, and he tried to run her down, but he crashed. The driver of the car, my husband, is he alive? Lisa asked. The solemn look on the nurse's face told her all that she needed to know. Lisa nodded to herself as the nurse left the room. Good, she whispered. The police questioned her. That was difficult. How could she even begin to explain that Brian had been trying to kill her? There was no proof. He had no police record. And that was her fault for protecting him. She had told no one about what had been going on in private for all these years, not even her closest friends and family. How could she? He had threatened to kill her if she so much as whispered a word to anyone about his true nature. But at least the bastard was dead now. It was quite an accident, said the police officer, who she noted seemed to be viewing her with a degree of suspicion. A total write-off. Forensics tell us that there's no way anyone could survive a crash like that. However, and here's the strange thing, his body has not yet been found. But I thought, Lisa began. Then she stopped, realizing she had misunderstood the look on the nurse's face. It was at that moment she felt something cold slide up the back of her neck. The flashbacks over the next few days were as brutal and upsetting as the persecution that had caused them. Her mind wouldn't let her escape from the repetitive crack of Brian's hand across her cheek, the look of pleasure on his face when he had strangled her cat right in front of her, and that stupid, infuriating catchphrase of his. I'm keeping my eye on you, he would say to her, as if she was a naughty schoolgirl and not his wife, occasionally adding to her humiliation by condescendingly wagging his finger as he said it. It bewildered her now why she had ever tolerated it. However, all that had been consigned to history. She was free of him now, and such a well-deserved ignominious end too. Determined to exorcise his vile ghost, she flounced off into town and bought some stuff she didn't need just for the hell of it. After all, her money was her own now. She felt her shoulders relax as the afternoon unfolded like a blissful panorama of opportunity before her. On arriving home, she made herself a gin and tonic, something she had been banned from doing, and sat out in the garden, enjoying the sunset. Lisa recalled how she was only allowed 10 minutes in the fresh air and no more, and she stared meaningfully at the window, daring him back into existence, fantasizing that she was defying him as he stood there, timing her, and what was he going to do about that? She raised her gin and tonic into the air and toasted his favourite spying place. Up yours, she shouted, with a serene smile. She had a TV dinner, another thing that had previously been forbidden, and left the dirty dishes on the coffee table. It would take some getting used to, this new life, she thought dreamily, but she fully intended it would become second nature in time. Then she went to bed and quickly fell asleep, exhausted by all the excitement of the day. Something woke her. She sat bolt upright and listened. Silence, but a silence so absolute it unnerved her. She waited for what she did not know. Then she decided to stop being a victim to her own fear to get up and take control. Just as she went to open the bedroom door, she heard something and froze, her hand in mid-air, hovering indecisively. It had been a distinct sound. The letterbox flapping. She was sure of it. Lisa remained there for a moment, but there was only silence once more. Slowly, carefully, she opened the door and stepped out onto the landing and looked down. In the gloom, she couldn't see anything. She inched forward and then flicked the light switch on. Nothing there. Her eyes fixed on the front door, the letterbox. But there was no movement, no telltale shadow of someone standing behind the glass. Feeling braver now, she began to pad quietly down the stairs, eyes wide open and searching for the slightest sign of anything untoward. She arrived at the ground floor landing, switched on the hall light and waited, her eyes on the door. She realized she was holding her breath. She exhaled long and deep. There's nothing wrong with this stupid letterbox, she told herself. Deciding to get on with her life, Lisa marched into the kitchen. She opened the fridge and had reached inside to get a jug of chilled water when it dawned on her. The cat flap. Her fingers recoiled from the jug. She slowly turned to face the back door. She caught a glimpse of something lying there on the floor in the waning sliver of light from the fridge as its door silently closed behind her. I told you I was keeping my eye on you. Lisa whirled round and screamed. To be continued.
Oh my God, Ian. Wow, okay. I need a minute. So Alex has asked, I'm so glad I don't have a cat flap. What is the hardest part about narrating your own audiobook?
Muscle control. I'd forgotten, I used to be an actor, so I'd forgotten how much you need to keep the muscles in your chest, your diaphragm and your throat from going flabby. And mine were flabby, unfortunately, by the time the books. I had to do a lot of warm-ups beforehand. It was only 2.5 days work, but it was really quite exhausting. So lots of water meaning lots of trips to the toilet as well. So there was all these knock-on things I hadn't even thought about. But it was a really good experience, I really enjoyed it, and it was well worth it.
Oh, you bring just such a lovely atmosphere to it as well. So thank you so much. Thank you you freaked everybody out. So yeah, well done you. Araminta, I'm actually going to try and come back to you if that's okay. Because we have a question from Anonymous. I guess it's an attendee rather than the, what are they? The organisation Anonymous. They would like to know, how did your Elizabeth Moss option come about, and have you spoken to her about the plans?
I have, yes. Very exciting. It just came about because whenever you have a book published, your agent tries to get people interested in making it into a film or a TV, and my agent just said to me, "Oh, I'm going to try Elizabeth Moss first." And I thought she was joking or meant someone different from Elizabeth Moss. But she didn't. And then I will never, 3 days later, I had an email from my agent that just said, "Are you sitting down?" So it was just saying that, yes, she went, yes. And we have spoken quite a few times, actually. She's very, very involved in the process, which is incredible and very, very exciting, and that very overused word surreal as well. So
is she lovely?
She is actually really lovely, and yeah, very, very switched on, as you would imagine, and they're great.
Can I just ask, do you know, will it be TV or film, or are you not allowed to say?
It's going to be I think I'm allowed to say that it's, actually I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I think it's going to be one of those American streaming, that we all have, on demand. Those. It's going to be one of those. I do know what it's going to be, but I know I can't say exactly what it's going to be at the moment. But
great.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that. So exciting. I think that's a VNATB exclusive. Whether we're meant to have it or not, who knows? The final reader for our mid-section, which has not been flabby at all the writers in the room have giggled at that, I can see, is Harriet Tice. Yay! I'm always really smug because I got Harriet to Noir at the Bar in Newcastle before her debut was published. I don't think I've got it on the shelf, actually. That's rude. How rude. Before Blood Orange came out and before she became a huge sensation. So, you know, just feel really smug about that. Anyway, Harriet Tice grew up in Edinburgh and studied English at Oxford University before doing a law conversion course at City University. Ooh. And now she's hanging out with us reprobates. Harriet practiced as a criminal barrister in London for nearly a decade and recently completed an MA in creative writing, crime fiction, at the University of East Anglia. Woo! Her first novel, Blood Orange, published in 2019 to huge critical acclaim, was a Sunday Times bestseller in paperback and was a Richard and Judy Book Club pick. Woo! Her second novel, The Lies You Told, publishes tomorrow, so we've got another publication eve, everybody. Harriet put out a really interesting tweet earlier, so there may be random laughing during her reading. I'm really excited for that too, so everybody please welcome Harriet Tice.
Hi, hello. Thanks very much for having me on, Vic. So yes, this is a passage that's from about a quarter of the way into the book, The Lies You Told. The core storyline is about what it's like to start at a new school years after everyone else has started there, and about the difficulties of the playground and the toxicities of the school gate. And in this scene, Sadie, the protagonist, discovers very late in the day that she's meant to have provided a costume for her daughter Robin to wear at a special school assembly the following morning. In desperation, she pulls together an outfit which is consisting of bed sheets and a stuffed owl to represent the goddess Athena. Robin has done everything she can to leave the owl behind, but Sadie is determined that she carries it onto the stage. I can tell the owl is a mistake from the moment I hand it over to a teacher to give to Robin. Is this real? The woman says, holding it out at arm's length. Yes. A dead owl? Yes, it's stuffed. Taxidermy. I'm a vegan, she says. I'm not asking you to eat it, I say, trying not to sound exasperated. What's it for exactly? The teacher asks. It's my daughter Robin's costume. She just needs to hold it and then she'll look the part, the goddess of wisdom. Right, the woman says, taking the owl from me with an expression of revulsion, holding it as gingerly as she can. It doesn't get better when the girls come out on stage in front of the school in the assembly hall. Even from the back of the hall, I can see that there's a space around Robin and that the girls are twitchy, not paying full attention to their performance. They're telling the story of Perseus and how he overcame Medusa. And the child playing the part of Medusa is in the best dress-up outfit of the morning, her skin all painted green and her head wreathed in a nest of multicoloured snakes. All the girls are beautifully turned out, in fact. Bacchus with vines, Aphrodite with a golden apple, lots of nymphs in proper dresses. No one is wearing a sheet, apart from Robin, and she looks very bedraggled by now. As does the owl, loose feathers following Robin around the stage. Nor is Robin as fluent as the other girls whenever she has a line to speak, and I have to strain to hear her. I try not to let my paranoia run away with me, but I'm starting to get a distinct feeling that something is happening up on the stage to put her off. I ignore the feeling, try to rationalise it, but when it comes to the final section, I can't pretend it's not real anymore. Robin is definitely being got at. She comes to the front of the stage, her mouth open as if for a declamation, when someone at the far left corner of the stage yells, "She's holding a dead bird, it stinks!" I clutch the sides of my chair as I watch the disaster play out, as if in slow motion. There's a buzzing around me, as the other parents start to notice too. Robin's face turns red, redder than I've seen it since she was a baby. She starts to speak, but hesitates, stops, holding up the owl in front of her as if in surprise, as if to ask, how did this owl end up with me? And then her mouth crumples, followed by the rest of her expression, and she looks at the owl one more time, her growing humiliation clear on her face, before she chucks it away from her, throwing it along the stage, straight into a group of nymphs and goddesses, and she turns and she runs. But she can't even run because of the sheet, the shitty floral sheet. It falls down round her feet and trips her up, and between a cloud of feathers and screams in the audience and the sight of Robin sprawling before clambering to her feet and running off stage in her vest and shorts, sports shorts, I don't know where to look. Before I can get up and go and retrieve Robin from the mess, someone pushes past me. It's Julia. She's sprinting up through the assembly hall, yelling and shoving her way past the teachers who've materialised on the stage. Daisy has allergies, Nicole says, turning to me. She's really allergic to feathers. This could be really serious. Julia's going to go spare. Where is Daisy? I hope beyond hope that she's been on the periphery of the action, backstage even. Nicole raises her hand and points straight into the heart of the commotion. I peer at the stage. It's hard to make out which child is which from a distance, but as I squint, I start to distinguish one from the other. I can see which girl was hit by the owl, bits of his desiccated corpse all over her head and body. It's Medusa, her snake's broken and her green makeup smeared. And as Julia launches herself at this child, alternately picking bits of bird off her and hugging her, it becomes very apparent that Medusa is Daisy. A stone lodges itself in the pit of my stomach.
Harriet, I was waiting for the random laughter. How could
I managed to control it. Thank goodness.
Damn it. You have been nominated 4 times, 4 different lines for Quote of the Week. So
that's nice.
Yeah, we're going to have several polls this week. Trevor Wood, our lovely Trevor Wood, would like to know, I love the school scenes in The Lies You Told. Are they based on real events?
No. Of course not. No.
And if so, will you name and shame the school to say?
No, purely any resemblance to anyone living in or dead is entirely due to coincidence and not 11 years at the primary school gate.
I've got all this to look forward to. Wonderful.
Oh, such joy.
Thank you so much, and best of luck for tomorrow, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so that is Act 2 over with. We do follow a 3-act structure here at Noir at the Bar, virtual Noir at the Bar, in fact. Some of you have been asking what's going to happen after next week when we disappear off into the sunset. You may not want to go and get a drink during this break. You might just want to sit and have a little watch. So we'll see you in 5. Thank you.